Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and my guest this week is Mr. Robert Christophor Coppes. I know I just slaughtered the the pronunciation of that a little bit. I apologize, but the you know he's got a very interesting background that led him to becoming a researcher of near-death experiences. This is something that I think everyone's a little morbidly curious about, and specifically in trying to get some insight into what the next phase of life is, if there is one, or where we do really go. It's a weird curiosity that we all have as humans, but he's also a board member, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and he's written a book called Impressions from Near-Death Experiences. And I think that's all the big ticket items I wanted to hit. So I need to move on to my announcements. As usual, if you haven't already and you've been listening for a while, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or subscribe to the channel if you're watching us on YouTube. And if you're new to the show, you probably don't know that there's a very powerful story behind all of this that's going on here. So head over to my website, zacktidwell.com, and you can read a little bit about it there and join my mailing list to get updates and announcements about some big projects that I have going on behind the scenes. It is not a spam mailing list. You won't get announcements about this podcast and every episode that comes out or anything like that. But I think with all of that out of the way, it is time to talk to Bob. How are you?
I'm fine. Really wonderful, Zach, to be on your show. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I
It's a kind of cold in Amsterdam where I'm sitting. It's below freezing, and that's it doesn't happen that often anymore with snow, and so yeah.
Are your guys' winters really gray? Like once it gets cold and snows, does it kind of stay that way?
Yes, it's gray, gray, gray. But once in a while, the clouds are gone, and then you notice that there is a sun, and that's wonderful.
Is there, like in the States, the big thing is snowbirds will go down to Arizona or like Florida in the wintertime. Is there a spot that people living in the Netherlands typically go to get away from the winters?
Oh yeah, they go to Spain or Italy because it's a little bit warm, well, much warmer than here, but it can be cold as well. I don't think it's like Florida. Florida will always be kind of warm, although I heard on the news that there can be ice and freezings there.
Yeah, they're rare, but it tends to stay nice and muggy down there all year. So you can go down
Muggy.
there.
Sounds wonderful.
Oh yeah, I go sit in the swamp and roast. But I uh I think before we start digging into all of this and even your background, and I'd like to get maybe a definition from you, given that this is your lane of expertise, as to what a near-death experience is, and also how we define death currently as it stands medically.
Oh, both questions are difficult, but let me tackle the first one, which is easier for me, is Um, a near-death experience is an overwhelming experience for the people who've had one of those. And it's overwhelming because they they say they have been on the brink of death, or they have been on the doorstep of heaven, or even in heaven. They say they have been dead, or in an otherworldly environment, which is totally different from ours, and that is really what makes it what defines it. I think that there is a talk of this otherworldly environment that is totally different from ours, with different laws, with different sets of values, things like that. So that's more or less how I would say a near-death experience is. But because it's so difficult to explain, that was the reason for having my book, which is Impressions of Near-Death Experiences, based on hundreds of quotes of near-death experiencers. Because only then you can take different vantage points and see from different angles what an NDE is. Oh, and then the question about when is someone dead? That's really difficult also for people in the medical field, because the definition moves. It's not a standing thing that everyone knows when that is. But notably, well, when respiration stops, heart stops, and when there is no activity in the brain, or very little activity in the brain, because that line is very thin or gray. There's a lot of gray there. It's difficult to explain that. I know there in the medical scene there are a lot of discussions when you can really say that someone is dead.
Yeah, it's a weird one, and I guess I I had never thought about it really until preparing for this and kind of trying to do my due diligence in terms of looking into NDEs and having at least a foundational understanding to come into this with. But you kind of touched on it with the grayness. It's subjective, but it's also, I feel like some of that stems from the fact that we don't know what happens next. All that this is, it's a world where we still don't know. Okay, are we missing? Is there some sort of brain waves that we aren't able to detect yet that go on? And specifically, I saw a study. I think it was in 2023 where small sample size. It's kind of hard to find people who are brain dead whose families are not only ready to take them off of life support, but also willing to have that information entered into a study. But so it was only 4 people, but when they took these people off of life support, I think I think 2 of the 4 experienced it was crazy surges of gamma wave activity in the brain, which is typically associated with consciousness. And specifically, one of them, I believe, it was a surge up to 300% of the brain activity that was still there. You mentioned that sometimes being brain dead, there is some low level activity going on, but that it surpassed the typical gamma wave, totality that you see in someone who is conscious and not in that state. So it still seemed like this very gray area where we're just operating purely off of what we know we can detect and inferring kind of because we don't know what that next stage is. And it's one of those things where we almost don't know what to look for if there is something after.
Yeah, you're right there, because I know this study as well. It was surprising that a few of them had a surge in activity in the brain, and then excessive changes in the brain. And um, that that baffled the people around. And well, and also another thing that I wanted to mention is also when you have transplantations of organs, there are really very strange stories going on, that people when they have an organ from someone else implanted, they change. The people that still live and have an organ from someone else change in behavior. And sometimes it's being found out that it's part of the behavior of the people that, or the person that gave this organ,
Oh, that is so weird.
transplanted. So it is a very interesting area. But the thing that I'm interested in is all the stories of people that have an NDE. And again, or not again, let me tell you that there are also people who have a near-death experience while not being in a medical critical situation. That happens as well. So the experience itself is defining what it is, that it's a near-death experience, not the cause. So just to give you an idea, most people have a near-death experience as a consequence of a medical critical situation, like a cardiac arrest or an accident or something like that. But there have been a lot of reports that we have from people who have been in a psychological downturn that was so deep that they, from in their deepest point, they had this NDE. And sometimes there are also reports of people who have prayed very deeply or have been meditating very deeply and had such an experience. And there are also cases of people, it's really incredible, that they had this spontaneously. I know of one guy who was sitting on the beach in India talking to a girl. He didn't know very well, but that was a very deep conversation. And suddenly he had this. He was out of his body. He flew away from Earth, which is sometimes reported by people, and then went through many of the stages that would define a near-death experience. And for us nowadays, the definition of a near-death experience is mainly based on the Grayson scale with 16 points in it that you can. It's a kind of a tick box exercise,
No.
just for scientists to be able to say this is an NDE or this is close to an NDE and this is barely an NDE. So that's. I just wanted to stress that it happens also under different circumstances.
Yeah, and I want to come
It may
back.
confuse you, but that's how it is.
Yeah, and I think it kind of speaks to our lack of understanding too of some of these things. But and I want to step through everything that you've said, but I want one thing I don't want to forget to ask is with the mental health crises contributing to these sometimes, do you see that specifically with like suicidal depression, or is it other types of ailments that can trigger those?
You mean that things like that can trigger an NDE, and like suicide, uh, or the thought of suicide? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so I'm someone who deals with depression. There's a very distinct difference. Even I, I go through really bad depression, but it's very different still when I go through it now that I have the tools to actually deal with it and understand it more to, or as compared to almost 7 years ago now when I shot myself in the face. That was a very different, it was different. And I think getting in that place where there's a difference between like last year, it was 2 or 3 months last year, I was in the worst bout of depression that I've had since 2021. I shot myself in 2019. That bout in 2021 was the worst depression that I've ever had, including before my suicide attempt. But again, I wanted to die then, but suicide was not an option for me. That was not an option anymore that I was even willing to entertain. So that registers very differently as opposed to I decided 4 days before I shot myself in the face that I was going to kill myself. And there was a very that's a big leap, even between the not wanting to be here and not understanding why you don't want to be here versus deciding I'm going to go through with this. And so that's where I'm curious. Okay, do you see this in schizophrenia and other issues, or is it specifically when people are severely depressed to that extent that can trigger these?
Yeah, it's what I know of the stories is of the cases is that that people when they are really depressed sometimes have an NDE. I should say it differently. Some of the people that we know who have had an NDE have it as a consequence of being so depressed that they don't know where to go, that I don't know how to picture that. They crawl over the ground, they sit in bed, they whatever. Or they scream or whatever they do. And sometimes people do have an NDE. I want to say it like that because not everyone who is in a depression has an NDE. Not like everyone who has a cardiac arrest has an NDE. It's like 20% of the people who had a cardiac arrest has an NDE. So maybe a similar kind of percentage or another percentage can be put on the people that have a psychological crisis. But it happened. So what we only can see from our stories, from the cases that we have, is that people who have had an NDE, most of them occur under a medical critical situation. a large other chunk happens under psychological depression problems and stuff, and then the others are really almost not there. And then another thing you mentioned is suicide. It's interesting that you touch upon that, because uh, people who have had who did a suicide attempt, most of the time, or they when they have an NDE, they come back with the idea, this is not the way, this is not what I should have done.
Mhm.
They have a nice NDE, they have the wonderful stuff there, but they have to go back because their life is not to be terminated. And then there is also, I know there's, I think that was in Switzerland, there was a group of NDEs who had gone through a suicide attempt, and having had an NDE, they counseled others who were struggling with suicide ideas, just to tell them it's not the way, it's not how it should be, or should be is wrong, maybe, to put it like that. It's not,
Mhm.
there's a reason for your life, there's a reason for everyone's life. That's the idea that I get from NDEs. NDEers.
Yeah.
They say we all have a reason to be here. Also, when you are in the deepest of problems that you have, or whatever that may want you to commit suicide or so, but even then, there's a reason for you to be here. And it's also that life is there for people to experience, to, well, sort of to go through, to, I maybe use the word enjoy, but it's, I understand that people who are in depressions don't really enjoy their life. I understand that very well. But what I understand is that life is something that is worth going through anyway, even if you're in the deepest problems.
Yeah.
Even then,
And I've been thinking about that a lot.
because maybe to interrupt you, because if you are on the other side, once you go to the other side, eventually, they say, it is so totally different there. It is more real than this, what we have here. This, what we think is real, is just a very weak representation of the other side. And if once you're there, you will see that your deepest problems have been um, are insignificant. It sounds horrible for people who have had, so who are in deep problems now, but if you take a totally different view, and that's the view from the otherworldly environment, what I understand is that everything falls away. All hate and strife and difficulties fall away. And the only thing that remains is love. Love is the most important thing. And that's why it is advised by a lot of NDErs to just concentrate on love, giving love and receiving love.
Yeah. And I think something you said there, I'm going to follow up on what you just said, but also what you said a second ago. I think there's a lot of, I think it's very accurate what you said, that life, we're given life to experience it. And that doesn't always mean enjoyment. But if you're that person listening and you are depressed right now, it does
Mm.
get better. You have to speak up for it to get better and start taking actions to get through it. But you can get through it, and it is we know how to treat it. It is Science shows it is entirely treatable. Like, yes, you may still have bouts later, but when you do have them, you will be more equipped to continue to push through. Kind of like, I guess, kind of like I already explained, just kind of trying to give you some background here. But I've been thinking about specifically what you said about that idea that, the maybe that the purpose of life, we all look for meaning, the meaning of life, or what is the purpose of being alive, which is different than what is your individual purpose that you've identified as a source that will keep you going or something that you get behind, but specifically that like the root meaning of life is just to experience it. Been thinking about this a lot lately. I don't know, and just not because we were getting prepared for this conversation, but just where I'm at in life. I'm yeah, just iterating over my goals and the things that I've been putting momentum behind for a long time, and maybe like where I want to go after I've completed these goals kinds of things, and trying to get to a place where I'm being more intentional about that. I think that is something very important for people to stop and ponder. Like, yes, you do have other responsibilities that come up, but was that, or how did you arrive at that thought? That's a very like big picture, but also if you stop and think about it, that is a heavy thing to realize.
Well, that's a good question, though. But it's how I came to this idea is after years and years of gathering all kinds of quotes from NDEers and talking to NDEers. And once you said experience life, I was thinking of one of the quotes that is in my book. And I really love that quote. And let me give you the quote how it is by a little girl of 8 years old. Um, she was abducted by two men and they tried to drown her. And because she was screaming, her father heard her and came to her rescue. But uh, but it was too late. I mean, she survived, but it was too late. She had her near-death experience. She was underwater, and she had her near-death experience. She exited her body. She left her body, and then went through a tunnel. And a tunnel is not something that is common. I mean, it happens several times regularly, but not one NDE is the same as another. They are all totally different. But the common thing is that they feel that they have been on the other side, in this otherworldly environment. So she leaves her body. She flies through a tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel, she sees light. And then there is this elderly guy, and she said, as she was 8 years old, Christina, and she said, it couldn't have been anyone else than God. So
Mm.
God said to her, you cannot stay. You have to go back. And then, but he said something like, the life you will do is easy because it has only 4 ingredients. And that applies to everyone, by the way. And the 4 ingredients are love, be loved. So that has to do with two sides of love. So receive love and give love. So love and be loved, but also just be and experience life. So just be how you are, what you are. And then the other one is experience life. Apparently that's important to just experience life. And some of the NDEers say, um, it is as if God, and I don't particularly like the word God, so I like the word source. Source wants to experience what it is to be in on earth, in a body, in a human body. He wants to experience life. And I always add, God is omnipotent, but God wants to experience what it is to be in a limited environment. And a limited environment is an environment where there is time and where we have place, because you are on the other side of the Atlantic and I'm here in Amsterdam. I can't just pop over to you in a second. Once you have your NDE, you can. Place and time are no issues, and there's a lot of other things that are limitations for us now, but will not be a limitation on the other side. It's difficult for people who hear this for the first time to understand that time is not there, or that time is all there at the same time. That is one of the quotes also in a book. I like that one very much because it seems that time is there all at the same time. So your birth and the moment you shot yourself and my birth and whatever I did is still there. It's still accessible. Uh, in a way that we don't understand. And that it's, I picture it once in a while like we are in 3 dimensions with time, but we cannot understand what it is to be in 4 dimensions and time, or to be in more than 4 dimensions at all, because that's we cannot understand how that is.
Yeah, and I mean, basically the picture that you painted is that source is trying to experience, you know, it can experience anything and it's choosing to have experiences within a given set of constraints, which the constraints for us at the highest level being the dimensions that we can experience, which is it's it because I was even thinking about this with the potential surge of brain activity, or not potential, like the measured surge of brain activity that they've seen in those patients being taken off of life support, but also just in general, again, in kind of pondering on these things in preparation for this podcast. Like, we're learning more and more about quantum mechanics and the idea that, a quantum particle can be any of the possibilities that it can be on these different aspects that are measured, like can be measured on the particle. It can be everything and in between, and it is all of those things at once until the time at which it is measured. I don't know if they've made any sort of direct hooks in terms of how quantum mechanics ties into biology yet. I expect that will, in the next couple hundred years, that will be something that does continually develop.
Less one than a few hundreds of years. I think within a few decades or so, people will understand more and more. Maybe 50 years or so, 20, I don't know.
Yeah. But that makes me wonder. It's like, okay, when is that? Obviously, I'm making big graphs here, but if we all have a quantum state, and then that is it being observed from a different perspective. All of a sudden, when you get that near death experience, is that a hook into something like that? It just it. I don't. This was me kind of trying to figure out, like, okay, what are some other things that we could potentially be missing in these measurements that in terms of the kind of obscurity and how we define death and all of these things. And it's weird because I had those before you started saying these things. I'm like, obviously these are big kind of layovers that I'm applying to what you're saying, but it's very thought provoking. And did for you personally, I know you were an economist at one point and so still doing a lot of research, but did you have a near-death experience that drew you into all of this, or how did all this get started?
No, I didn't have a near-death experience that I know of.
Okay.
No, well, it's interesting. At one of the conferences of IANDS, there was a woman coming up to me and she said, "You have had a near-death experience as a child." And I said, "No, I can't remember." And she said, "Well, I can see from your aura that it has certain colors, and that's only there when, as a child, you've had a near-death experience." So I don't know, but I can't remember it. And there was a moment that I have been really, really grasping for air. I remember that very distinctly. But maybe that was the trigger if I had a near-death experience. But the thing for me that really made it was that I was raised Roman Catholic, and with hell and purgatory and with judgment and at the end of times, or at the end of your life, at the end of times actually. And I didn't like that, because why would I be judged differently from someone who has been born in a very poor country, in a place with bad role models, where shooting others and I don't know, raping women is normal? Why would someone like that be judged differently? I mean, that kind of life is much more difficult than mine. So I didn't like that. And then when I read Raymond Moody's book, the one that coined the term near-death experience, that's a doctor. Um, in his book, there was someone who spoke about her near-death experience, and in the near-death experience, there was a life review. And again, not everyone has the same NDE, and not everyone has a life review, but if you have a life review, the thing is that you see your whole life before you. You can access details, you can zoom out, but you see whatever you did to others, and you see it from your own point of view, but also the point of view of the persons involved. But the interesting thing is that there is no judgment. There is no judgment. That's being said consistently over and over again. There is no judgment. If there is a judgment, then the judge is you. There's a wonderful story in my book of a boy who had a near-death experience. I think he was 14 years old as a consequence of a drowning. And he saw his life review in the presence of an angel. And when it was over, he said to the angel, I hope I won't be judged too severely. And then the angel said, well, you will be judged by the most powerful judge there is. And then the boy went a little bit silent and afraid, and he said, when will that happen? And then the angel said, well, it just happened. You are the judge. So just to give you the idea that there is no external judge, there is no judge. And if there's a judge, it's you, no one else. There's no God that comes around with the Bible or the Quran or the whatever book and says you didn't do this or you did that and that was wrong. No, there's no judgment. And that was, for me, I could relate to that. And I thought, well, in that case, near-death experiences might be interesting or maybe true.
Yeah. So you found that quote from that boy before you ever really, well, because you were already at the IANDS conference, which again was the International Association for Near-Death Studies.
Yes.
But so you were already interested, but you were still working as an economist at that point before you had this experience.
I did both things. It's interesting. Yeah, I sometimes feel like I'm in a split, as what you say. It's so on one side you're in economics and with finance and money and such, and I had to do with billions. So, and those were just nuts for me. Those were not my billions, but it was I had to deal with all that, and on the other side I was interested in spiritual stuff, and I couldn't find the right thing until I found this book, and then I thought, well, this is true. But I was struggling with my career, so I was that takes a lot of attention. So I went into doing my career as good as possible. I was a banker, and then I wind up to be at the university again, where I got my PhD, and then later I was in central banking. But then when I was in the central banking, I was thinking, what is it? How is the research in this area progressing? And then I noticed there was this IANDS organization in the US, and I totally overlooked an organization in my own country that did a wonderful study, a prospective study, first one ever done in the area of near-death experiences. And prospective study means that it's repeatable, and that's those kind of studies are accepted by science. And what happened was that this group of people that did this study, they had a number of hospitals in the Netherlands during a number of years, and every time there was a cardiac arrest in those hospitals, they had that one in the database, and they would ask just one question: do you have any recollection of you being out while having your cardiac arrest? And interestingly, there was 18%, like 62 cases, that had an NDE. And the others of the 344 in total didn't have an NDE. So the question wasn't really the question was, why did one group had an NDE and the other didn't? So you can compare both groups, and that's what they did. And they didn't find any any differences. Like both groups had a lack of oxygen. Both groups had brains that were dying. So maybe when there is substances triggered in the brains, in a dying brain, those couldn't have triggered the NDE because both groups had those substances in the brain, and there were medicine was checked, and the belief system was checked, and nothing really was significant as an explanatory factor. So and that was such an interesting and important research that was published in the Lancet, and the Lancet is a very important medical journal, one of the top ones, and it got a lot of attention. And that study was repeated in the United States later, and in the UK, in the United Kingdom, with similar kinds of results. So it isn't on the lack of oxygen or something else that triggers an NDE, but what it does, we still don't know.
Yeah, it's honest. I was shocked earlier when you said it's, about 20% of patients going into cardiac arrest that experience it. I had no idea it was that prevalent. And also the fact that there wasn't some correlation between religious beliefs and the occurrence of those things was also I came in expecting that to be a common, like a corollary, but with all
Just
this
to
stuff.
give you some extra statistics, you know that about 4 to 5% of the people have around has had a near-death experience. So that is like if let's say 100 people, your friends, relatives, people that you are working with, then the 4 or 5 of them will have had an NDE. They don't talk about it, but they have had such an experience.
And so you can say that it is that common because when in an environment where it's anonymized and these people aren't going to receive any sort of social repercussions for speaking up,
Yeah.
then they will admit that they've had it.
Yes, it's especially the fear that they will be thought of as lunatics or crazy or something like that, or psychologically wrong. I know a woman in the Netherlands who was told when she was speaking about her experience that if she kept on doing it, they would put her away in an asylum. So you stop. You don't talk anymore about this. But that's long ago. It's like 20 years ago that I spoke with her.
Would hope it's a little better now, but I'm sure there's places where it's still not. But
Yes.
I think
And religion, that's the other thing that you mentioned. Religion is very interesting. That it's not only Christian people that have these NDEs. It happens everywhere on the globe. It happens to anyone. It can happen to anyone. All walks of life can have an NDE. It's atheists, it's Buddhists, it's Hindus, Jews, Muslims, anything. Anything, what color of skin doesn't matter, what kind of race you are doesn't matter, which country you are, it doesn't matter. In my book, actually, there are a lot of NDEs from all over the place, from Iran to Africa, somewhere, places in Africa, Australia, the United States, anywhere, South America, all over the globe.
and that's so important that it persists across every culture, especially some of these places have probably never heard it of the term near death experience. And like, yeah, you know,
Yeah, and there are cultural differences to continue going on that subject. Um, in Christian-oriented societies, sometimes NDErs see Jesus. Not everyone, but there are a lot of stories that see Jesus. But in other societies, they see Krishna, they see important religious people from the Islam or other religions. There are a lot of those kind of stories. So um, it is it is important to understand that there is these differences, but the core of near-death experiences is the same, and the core is that they meet unconditional love on the other side. and they understand that love is the most important thing. And that another thing that really struck me when I was doing my latest book was that that we belong to this oneness, to this one energy, or that we are part of Source. Actually, that we are. Some people even say we are God. There's one of the people in my book who said, what was it again? I am in God and God is in me. We are perfect unity. For some people, it might sound really outrageous or blasphemic. I don't know, but I have to quote people. If I give quotes, I can't just say, well, I'll discard these and I'll have those. I have to have all of them.
Jeez. And have you thought at all about, because even hearing you talk about this, so on one hand, it's interesting that you say the oneness thing. You hear people talking about psychedelic experiences, specifically around DMT, that they have something similar to that. I know some people have some theories that, like, oh, maybe your pineal gland releases DMT into your system when you're having a near-death experience, and that's what causes these. But on the other hand of that, have you stopped and pondered, and I know this is entirely subjective, but if religion came out of people having these experiences way, way, way in the past, and that is kind of where that some of that structuring came from, because it's interesting that there is this underlying tone of there is no judge but you.
Yeah, but if you go and look at each of the religions, maybe not so the Jewish religion, I don't know, but in most religions there is some kind of judgment of what you do, and that's beside the truth that I believe is the truth.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why I find NDEs more the truth than reading a scripture, being it any religion, from any religion. It is because there are also veridical observations, and that's a difficult term to just express what they are. These are verifiable out-of-body experiences. You have to understand that if an NDEer leaves his or her body, sometimes they can roam around where they are, being it the operating dome or the crash site of their car or where the accident was at home, I don't know. But sometimes they can see what is happening. Other people can't see them. That's interesting. That's really interesting. You are a ghost.
They
You're just consciousness. Your consciousness is there. Let me put it like that, because using the word ghost might
attach some
will
connotations. Yeah.
yeah. You are consciousness. Your consciousness is there, but it's outside your body. And that's interesting because it shows us that that's possible. Until now, we have always thought the consciousness is created by the body. If the body is dead, there's no consciousness. And we say that because every time someone dies, we can't talk to them anymore. Now, with these NDEers, it's different. They say, I was outside my body. I could see what the doctors did. I could hear what the nurses said. I saw this a machine or this device that they use, and they give a perfect description, or some other things that they can tell about what they have seen. And when they come back, and that's where it's important, when they come back again in their body after they have their near-death experience, they tell that what they have seen, and then it is confirmed independently by others. If that's not the case, then it might still be true, but for science, it's important that it's confirmed independently by others. And there are hundreds of these stories out there, and they are documented. And to make a distinction, because in my next edition of my book, I want to put a difference between veridical observations that have observations on Earth, like what the doctors do and what the nurses say, versus the other category of veridical observations is where they see or have a meaningful conversation with on the other side. And to give you an example here, oh, sorry, my telephone Siri starts suddenly.
You're okay.
But the other category is, let me give you an example there, because there was an NDEer who was in the hospital because of some lung infection, I think it was. And then she exits her body. She sees the family around. She can tell what they wear. So it's also from the first category that she can have these veridical observations where she can really say what they were wearing, and that was confirmed later on. But the interesting thing was she was also on the other side, in the otherworldly environment, and there she met deceased relatives, and one of those presented himself as a baby boy, and he said to her, "See and remember how I am dressed and how I look like, because you have to ask your father about me, because I'm your brother." And then she says, "I don't have a brother." And then the baby boy said, "Just check with your father." And then when the whole episode is over and she has to go back again to her body and be in her body again and being resuscitated and recuperated. So then she asked her father about this, what she saw. And then the father said, "Yes, you had a brother before you were born, but your brother passed away very soon, within a day or within hours. And we were so devastated that we didn't want to talk about it, especially not to you and not to burden you." So they never spoke about the boy to her. She didn't know of the existence, yet she was given this piece of information on the other side. So there are many of these kind of cases. And for me, as a scientist, it's important that these are there, because otherwise these stories are just fairy tale-like stories that are nice to hear, but for me, they would lack some substance. And these kind of things, these kind of stories that are confirmed independently, give me enough give enough credibility for me. It's kind of substantial evidence that they are real.
Yeah, but especially when in the case like that's eerie almost hearing hers. But like in the case of you're like, yeah, the paramedic showed up wearing blue scrubs with a red logo on the right shoulder or something.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how can you dismiss that?
Yeah.
It's
Well, skeptics really can dismiss anything. So I stop talking to them because they don't want to look into the facts. And that, for me, that's, I don't know why they do that. I know some of them, because one of the people that I know still converses with them, and I say, "Well, just stop. They will not."
I think those are cynics. It's healthy to be
Yeah.
skeptical. We should be skeptical in life, but when you are when being skeptical is looking into things to get a better, to get your own read on the room, whereas the cynical person is looking to disprove something outright. I think
Yeah.
that's,
Right.
I
I
think
think
we've,
they have a function. It's important that these people are there, skeptics, because that's how science advances.
Mm.
When people take different views, but then you have to check them. And if you check them, then you have to throw one out of the window and go on with the other one. But they still seem to be wanting to hold on to that notion, and that for me, it has been thrown out of the window already.
Yeah. Well, and you've mentioned again, these experiments are being repeated. This research is being repeated around the world and validated. So, what is I would imagine you probably get quite a bit of blowback given the fact that you're writing books about all of this and your position in IANDS. But what is that counter argument to the science in these renowned journals where it is, unless people are fudging their data, like it's all been repeated.
I don't understand the question.
So with these cynics, because
Yes.
there's documented science that is validating these experiments through repeating them. What When you get cynics like that, which I would imagine you probably hear from a lot, what is the argument against it then?
Well, they cannot throw out the evidence from the repeatable, so the prospective studies. But they will still say near-death experiences are not real, and there are a lot of people that say it's still you're not really dead, because if you're really dead, you can't talk anymore. You're gone. Um, so there must be something there. There must be something, some electro things still going on in your brains, like we just mentioned from this research that you had, that you referred to. So there must be something still there that triggers this. Um, yeah, I don't know. But I what I find baffling is that maybe there is still some kind of electricity in your brain when everything else is gone, maybe somewhere deep. But can this little electricity create an experience that is so very, very clear, that gives you the impression of reality that's beyond our own reality? Can that happen? And can you really get outside of your body and see these things, like what the doctors did, or where they put your dentures, is actual case. How is that possible when they were resuscitating you and you were out? You couldn't have seen anything. There was a total chaos in your room because they tried to revive you again. How is it possible that you have seen that they put your dentures out of your mouth into a crash cart and rolled it away and somewhere?
Yeah.
It's for me it is it's unbelievable that that the little electricity that was left in your brain could have done that.
Yeah. And even if you're like, okay, well, no, that woman was still awake and she saw that. She physically saw that with her eyes because she was still alive. Like, we know that eyewitness testimonies are horribly inaccurate. Like, she would still be an eyewitness there to her own experience. Like, that is so, there's a lot of grasping at straws there for that to even be mildly entertainable, which is, it's interesting. But with, you talked about these different categories, and with your next book, these, I think you called it the first category of these radical observations. What are the others?
Yeah, it's so the veridical observations are verifiable out of body experiences. The first one is that you see things on Earth. Your consciousness gets out of your body, and what it sees is how the doctors are trying to resuscitate you, or what they are doing during the operation. That's the first category. The second category is when you are when you left Earth, so to speak, and you are in this otherworldly environment, that you have meaningful conversation there, and that you bring that information that you get on the other side, you bring back home, back to your body, back to where you are on Earth, and that it later or maybe immediately proves to be correct, like the case with the baby boy, with the example that I just gave. So that is the second category. It's the two categories are what I think. It's not something that is out there, but I wanted to make a distinction between within the veridical observations. One being where you can say your consciousness can be outside of your body because you have seen things around your body that you couldn't have seen from outside your body because you took a totally different point of view. You were
Mm.
somewhere else. And the other one being where you had information from the otherworldly environment.
Being that you are in this otherworldly place and someone is telling you something. Is that what you mean?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The meaningful conversations that you have there. There's a lot of meaningful conversations, but not every conversation is something you can later verify independently. But you can do that with how do you say that, precognitions. Some people see what what's going to happen in the future. In my book, I had a case myself where I was speaking with a woman who said in March 2008, just before the financial crisis, that something was really going to happen, and she said it's alarming. And I said, no, everything is okay. Bear Stearns is being rescued by the Federal Reserve, so nothing is wrong. And that's what everyone thought, because the stock prices went sky high. And she said, no, 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 it's really going to happen. It will affect a lot of countries. It will affect many, many people all over the world. It is really going to be deep. You haven't seen anything like it. And I, as an economist, thought, well, okay, I don't believe her. And then in September of 2008, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all these big companies, AIG, the biggest insurance company in the world, the General Motors, and some of these car companies all went bust because of the financial crisis. Countries like Iceland went bankrupt. The US had difficulties. The Federal Reserve had to step in a way that has never been seen before, unprecedented. So she had it right all along. She had seen that all along. And she had her NDE in 86. So that was 22 years before it happened.
And that's when she had that premonition.
Yes. And she said, I have this information and I don't know what it is. I've been struggling with it for 22 years, and it is a feeling. There's no label to it. It doesn't say when it happens. But she said, with everything that's happening now, with what I see in the newspapers, and she was referring to Bear Stearns and things like that. She said, it's now. It's going to happen now. So what I saw in 22 years before is going to happen this year, now, very soon. And I didn't believe her. So she had this information all along for 22 years. There was no label there.
That's one where my skepticism comes in, where I'm like, and not in the fact that she was lying, but in the fact that, okay, if she had this, but like it's almost like, oh, this is the prophecy. Now is a time that it could be fulfilled. Now I'm going to say it's being fulfilled now. Like, I don't know.
Though she said something like the tension in the world that I feel now, because people who have had a near-death experience become very sensitive. She said that matches exactly with what I felt during my NDE.
The same feeling.
Yeah, same feeling. It was not a label. There was no timestamp on it. So she said the feeling is the same. So it's going to happen now. And yeah, I refuted it.
I mean, understandable, but that's just, obviously she seems to have had some sort of negative experience with that, but are there, because, you did mention a lot of people go to the otherworldly realm, whatever we want to call it, and then have almost like it's bliss. But are there any people that have more of what would be, recognized as a hell type of experience?
Yeah, that's true. I have to say yes, because it's a minority of people or cases, but they happen. And there are a number of categories in this, but there is a category that has really hellish an awful, very fearful views, experiences, but I have to address this properly, because what we know now from research, it's difficult to research because not everyone who has had a distressing NDE comes around and says, "Hey, I had a distressing NDE, and I'll tell you about it." No, like the people who've had a blissful one, they don't always come out in the open. But you can imagine that people who've had a distressing one with hell and such a thing will certainly not come out, because they are afraid to be judged by everyone. Because if you have been in hell, you must have been something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's wrong to think. It's dead wrong to think like that, because we know now that people who've had a distressful NDE, let me think how to put it. It's, you cannot say that people who have had a distressful NDE have been bad. And then apart from quote unquote how you define bad, because that's difficult in itself. And you cannot say that people who've had a blissful NDE must have been good. There are cases where people have been bad and had a blissful NDE, and there are cases in my book where people who have been just average, like anyone, like you and me. I mean, and they had a distressing NDE. So the idea is that there must be a different explanation than just to say, "Oh, you have been bad, so you will have it. That's why you have a distressful NDE." That's wrong. So I want to put that really clear on the table. Thinking like that is wrong. So there must be another explanation for distressing NDEs. And what we think, and there is some circumstantial indications that's the way it is. The idea is that distressing elements might pop up from our collective unconscious, or from your own personal conscious. And to give you an example, a woman who I really admire because she wrote a book about her distressing NDE is Kathy McDaniel. And I read her book, and it's also in my book. And she was just an average person, nothing special. What she had was that she was afraid of hell, because she was raised in a Catholic tradition with hell and purgatory. But in this case, I was raised like that as well, but my mother didn't put it in me very much so that there's hell. In her case, there was, and she was afraid of attracting AIDS. She was very judgmental towards prostitution and stuff like that. So all those elements came together in her near-death experience, and eventually it turned nice. It turned blissful, and that's what we know. In most cases of distressing NDEs, they turn into a blissful NDE. And that's where I think it's just the first step. And because you are able to put into your experience whatever you want to, it will pop up. If you want to have a hell, it will pop up. But I don't think it will stay, because eventually there's only one thing, and it's the place we all go to. It's home. That's what NDErs say. There's only home to go to, and there's one home, and it's source. We are from the source, and we go back to the source. So there's not a separate hell or so. And there are also NDErs who explicitly hear during their NDE that there is no hell or no purgatory. That's one of those. And one of the others said, we all go home to this place, to this wonderful place with unconditional love. Every single one, no exception.
Has that given you a lot of peace in your own life and thinking of what death looks like?
It it coincides with what I thought. Remember, I started off with telling you that I couldn't imagine why people being born in a less affluent country than mine and being in a situation where they have wrong role models, where men kill women or kill other men and do things and whatever. It's awful. That these would be judged in the same way as well, that they would be judged and have to go to hell or so, because they didn't ask to be born in a situation where they have wrong role models, where they see that men shoot each other or deal drugs or do whatever, and where they steal because they don't have food enough. I never had to steal because my parents were rich enough to provide for me, and I can provide for myself now. So there's a difference in being in the outset of where someone comes from, and why would that not be taken into account? That doesn't matter. That didn't figure for me. That's how I would say it. Yeah.
So it hasn't changed a whole lot. This has just reinforced that kind of.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I
I
guess.
was born in Venezuela. I saw my father worked for Shell. We were on the richer side of society, and I saw as a child, I was 5. I saw 1 to 5. I saw as a child the difference between people, and I was wondering why. Already then, I was wondering why there was this difference. And after that, I was wondering why would we be judged differently uh, uh, because they have this other situation, a less advantageous situation to do things in. Why would they be put in hell because they have been stealing food, or I don't know.
Yeah. How old were you? Or well, I guess how old are you now? And when were you living in Venezuela?
I'm 68,
Okay.
and I was living in Venezuela from 1 to 6, and then we moved to Iran. That's where all the troubles are now.
Yeah.
And we stayed there for 2 years. That was still in the time that the Shah was there.
Yes. So you experienced Venezuela before Chavez came to power. You experienced Iran before the Ayatollah were in power.
Yes. Well,
Wow.
and that was, I mean, the Shah was not a very nice person either. I mean, he had the Savak, which was a kind of a very gruesome police that put people in jail and tortured them. Torture is going on everywhere,
Yeah.
all
And
over
we do
your
it too.
country.
Yes.
I know.
It's that's the thing I think people forget is like, hey, we do it too. It's
Yeah.
you're not hearing about it, but we're doing all these countries are doing all the same nasty things behind the scenes. It's
I was so surprised to see the statistics that the most prisoners are in your country,
well,
both absolute and relatively seen to the population.
we have privatized prisons, and so it's a business here. Not all, but there are privately owned like businesses that are prisons, and I think that's a huge part of our problem. Which is I've actually a couple of the recent episodes have kind of been touching on some of that stuff. It just it's gross. So
Yeah.
um,
And for me, the thing that I understand from near-death experiences is that love is the most important thing, and that is the guidance that we should all have. And I wonder if those prisons or many prisons, especially when there's torture, like in Iran or in on the West Bank, or you mentioned any countries, China, Russia,
North Korea, yeah.
whatever. If that has anything to do with love, no is the answer. So change it.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I have to think on that. I was in the infantry and the Marines, so like there's a very different mode, like nothing done there. I guess those actions might stem, and I'm not a combat vet. Thankfully, I didn't see combat, but those actions, I guess you being willing to go to war and die is maybe out of the love of your loved ones that you're going willing to go do those things and put things on the line. But I get the actual act, obviously, of war. Yeah, I guess
But
maybe.
you sacrificed a lot. You sacrificed your sight.
Yeah, but that was my own inaction after I got out. I started spiraling about 5 months, I think, before I was honorably discharged. I bad life circumstances coming back from my second deployment. My wife was cheating on me. And then shortly after I separated from her, I was in a nasty motorcycle accident and acquired a traumatic brain injury from that. And that's really first time I ever started dealing with depression, couldn't sleep, became very agitative and impulsive, which are all common things with brain injuries. And I started to drink instead of talking about that stuff. And so a year after that is when I shot myself. So that wasn't a byproduct of something that I saw in the military.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Um,
Nevertheless, it's a story. It's a big story. Yeah.
yeah. When
And interesting, we have to remember that there are a lot of people who are in this moment or in that situation that you were contemplating suicide. And the only thing that I can say, please don't do it, because there is a good reason for you being on Earth. And that's what I understand from near-death experiences. No one on Earth is here without a reason. So um, we don't know what it is. Many people, well, some NDErs, that's interesting. They ask, "What is the reason why I am on Earth?" Or they are being told what their purpose is, and then when they go back, they've totally forgot that. And I think that's the purpose is that they if they would know what it is, they would just rush out the door and do what they were supposed to do and then hope to die. Because on the other side, every NDE has a longing for the other side. There's a kind of homesickness still. So but still, we have to remember that we all have a purpose. Everyone is valuable. Also, the beggar in the street. We shouldn't just step over them. They they are also God's children. They are also from the source. They are just as valuable as you and me.
And kind of touching on what you've already commented on with your upbringing is like a lot of those people came from horrendous situations, or even if they didn't, they made some mistakes that got them there. And that, those mistakes do add up and you end up with so much momentum behind that it is hard to get yourself out of it. And sometimes you just need some help getting out of it. And there's a lot of mental health stuff there too. And that's any big issue like that. It is a little empathy goes a long way with stuff like that. And it's, I don't know, I think like you touched on purpose. Again, I think that's part of at least finding that for yourself, like back to that differentiation between the purpose of life and your purpose, like in the here and now, I think is part of that experience of finding that, that's part of your development as a human, I think, is finding what that is for you, that regardless of all other circumstances, you will do that thing. And even though it's not fun all the time, like you will derive some enjoyment from it. But I think, like you said, why I took the detour on telling people earlier that if you are that person that's in that place where you don't want to be here, it is entirely navigable. It's not easy and it's not always fast. It probably won't be fast for anyone, but it is possible and it does get easier. And it's important. All these things that you've said are very important for people to hear. But I wanted to ask, I realize you've already kind of touched on, maybe you didn't say this. I know in terms of when people go in this other place, when they go home, is there may not be time there, but they still have at least a perception of time, given the fact that we live in a place where there is time. So is there any trend in terms of how long they perceive themselves to be there while they're there?
That's interesting that you say it like that, because once you are there seems not to be time. Um, and interestingly, some of the people said I was weeks out there. One even said I was more than a year. So the whole notion of time is gone. When there is no time, you cannot put a label on it because you have no reference.
Yeah.
So these people may say it was a year or 10 years or a few weeks. There is no reference because there is no time there. And what I understood from one of them is that that's how was it again? That she said every time I got an answer, it was as if I could only understand that answer when I was deeper back into time. So, and it was, you have to picture it. Well, I pictured it as she was hovering outside of time, and every time she had to understand something, she was a little bit more in time, and then she went out of time again. So how that really works, I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it. The only thing that I know is that there's a lot of people that say, I don't, there's no time. There's no time.
Okay. Did you?
Maybe another thing that I would like to mention from life reviews, I think that's very important if you allow me to do that,
Yeah.
is that people see their lives from not only, well, that you get to see your life, what you did in your life every single moment, but you don't see it only from your own point of view. You see it also from the point of view of someone else. You become that someone else. So you are that someone else, and you see what you did to that person. So if it's something nice, you will see the joy that was on the other person's side, but you will experience it as that other person. But if it's something that is degrading or painful or so, then you will see it. You will see your actions from the other point of view. And I find that very interesting, apart from the fact that it gives you the impression that we are all one, because how else can I feel what you went through or go
Yeah.
through as if I am you? So there's no distinction or division between you and me. How else can that be if we are not all the same? We are all from the same source. We are all the same. It's one. But the interesting thing is here that that's what I say so often. Be conscious of that love is important and that you will feel what you do to others. So next time you do something, be conscious of that and think twice if it is something not so nice, not so loving, because love is the quintessence. That's the important thing.
Yeah, imagine. I imagine being able, what the hell that would be like if you were in combat and you killed someone with your hands and you had to experience that from both sides, the hatred of both sides, and then that.
Yeah. Think
Oh
of
my
what you see
gosh.
now in your news. You see these things in Gaza, you see in the West Bank, you see in the Ukraine and Russia, you see Sudan. You see this strife in your own country. The guy who killed the woman in Minnesota, he will eventually feel what it is to be her, to see the effect that it has from the other side, and she will see his point of view.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It is. And I think also feeling those emotions outside of the context of being there, which I guess if you're seeing it from their perspective, you would then be in that situation. But if you somehow saw it as like a bystander, but you could feel both sides, would
Mhm.
just be
Yeah.
probably paralyzing.
Yes.
But
And there is no judgment. I want to stress that there is no judgment. The only thing seems to be that you need to understand your place on earth, or your place in the whole uh, structure, or whatever it is. That's the only thing. And to understand, it's understanding.
and how prevalent did you say these life reviews are?
Not every NDE has a life review, but when they have such an a review. It is really a life changer. Well, the whole NDE is a life changer. People change thoroughly. But when you have had a life review and you see what you did to others, and just to give you an example here, Daniel Brinkley, who is also in my book, he was a guy who shot a lot of people, killed a lot of people. And when he was going through his life review, he felt all the kills he made. He felt the other side, but he also felt the side, the perspective of the wives of the people that he killed and the children of the people that he killed. So it doesn't only remain with the person you do it with. It is more. It goes further than that. So, but he saw that, and that was really very, very difficult to say it in a very easy way. But he had a blissful NDE nonetheless.
Oh.
And that's one of the examples that I have of a person that we may label as not very nice, but he still has a blissful NDE without a judgment.
Yeah, and when you wrote this book, was did you meet with all of these people, whether it be physically or virtually, or was some of this data you were pulling from other places, like their own books?
Yes. Yeah, the thing is that I wanted to have quotes in my book that people could go back to see that it's not that I thought of them. So I took them from books, took them from the IANDS website, took them from the NDERF website, that's a Near Death Experience Research Fund website, but also a lot from my own conversations with people. There's a lot of people that I spoke on the telephone or spoke one-on-one. There's a lot of information out there. It's also on internet. If you go through a lot of them, or a number of them, you'll be affected. You will understand sort of what it is, and it will change people's lives. And I think for the better. Not that people who've had an NDE become saints. That I don't want to say that, because I know some NDEers that still make, well, in my eyes, they are mistakes. Can be mean to others. But it gives them, in any case, the idea that money and power are not the things that are important. It
Mm.
is having to do with other people, socialize, doing things for others, love, and not only for people, but also for nature, for animals too.
Yeah. Is there Has there been any sizable, I guess, subset of the people that you researched who end up really struggling with what they saw during their near-death experiences?
They all struggle in the sense that they've seen this otherworldly environment, and they know that it's much nicer with so much love, unconditional love, and you don't find that on Earth. Not even from the parents towards their children. It's still sort of conditional.
Okay.
So that is what they struggle with. They would love to go back. They know that suicide is not the way, but so they keep on going. The little girl that I mentioned before, remember, Christina, 8 years old, with love, be loved, just be, experience life. She struggles with the whole idea every day. Sometimes she's depressed, sometimes she copes with it, but she doesn't want to be here. It is a
Gosh.
homesickness. It's a homesickness. So not everyone has it that tough and that way as she has. Some people can easily cope with it, but
Yeah.
normally all of them would like to go back. It's a
Is,
homesickness.
is she still a child or is she an adult now?
No, she's an adult. She's a wonderful
Wow.
woman. She lives in California, and she works with animals.
That's dark though, that's like an underlying. I mean, I can see why based off of what you said, like why you would want to go back, but that can almost seem like be kind of a
Well,
lingering
they
thought.
see you just have to look at the news and then think, why am I here? My God. On the other side, it was not there. It was all, well, hunky dory, was all love and stuff like that. And there was nothing, no difficulties. The interesting thing is people say it's so liberating to leave your body behind because your body is really confining. It's a structure that's really it's so confining. It's awful. And when you can leave your body behind, it's like a liberation.
But yeah, I mean, going back to kind of how we started this, that is a incredibly limiting set of constraints from which you have to experience the world. It's just that is so it's so fascinating, man. Like, is there anything that I haven't touched on this other than I obviously want to know what your next book is and all that stuff, but specifically on the idea of exploring near-death experiences and what they are and all of your research. Is there anything else that I haven't touched on yet that
No,
we
it was
should?
quite comprehensive.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to just tell the listeners to uh, get acquainted with NDEs and see how interesting they are and how they can also change your life for the better. Because it will probably make you more happier and being more focused on things that really are important. And that's not power and money. Power and money are you can't take with you to the other side. Love you can take to the other side. So make more love, create it, receive it. It's important too.
Oh, if there's one thing my audience loves, it's making love. So I'm sure.
I'm sure.
where where
Who
can
doesn't?
yeah where can everybody find impressions of near-death experiences and all the work that you're doing at IANDS?
They can find that on Amazon. My book is available on Amazon. It's an IANDS publication. And they can find me on bobcoppes.com, and Coppes is Coppes. It's actually it's on the screen that I have it next to my face.
Awesome.
So it's
Okay.
in small letters, but there's also a way to find me. There's a form that people can fill out a question if they have one, and then send it to me, and I always answer.
Okay. Do you have any sort of timeline on the next book? Like, have you started that already? Is it what's going on there?
Well, I'm working on it now. I'm
Okay.
researching the IANS archives with all the NDEs that are in there. People can, if they have had an NDE, they can submit it to the IANS website. And I'm researching reincarnation at the moment. See if many people with an NDE talk about it. Until now, I can see that it's only a very small percentage that really talks about it.
Okay. Well, you'll have to let me know when it's coming out because I'd love to do this again with you at some point. But thank you for taking the time today. I mean, this seriously, this I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it. This was just beyond interesting. Like this time flew by. I'm so thankful that we were able to do this. So thank you for coming on.
It was really wonderful, Zach, to be on your show, and yeah, you have gone through a lot of things yourself, so it's wonderful from only from that perspective to be with you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man. And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. I think the outside of just the fire hose that this episode was, just remember if you're that person who's struggling that suicide is not and never is the answer. I've beat the dead horse on it here before, and I will continue to do so whenever there's an opportunity. What you're experiencing right now is temporary. You can get through it. You just have to let someone know that you were struggling. And I know that can sometimes be the hardest thing that you might have ever done in your life. I know it was that way for me when I struggled with those thoughts after my suicide attempt. It's but it does get better. It can get better. It will get better. You just have to speak up, please. So if you don't have someone that you can reach out to the suicide hotline, and they will get you the help that you need. That's at 988. And yeah, I've called them before. Do not be afraid to use that resource. So other than that, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.